to the work session of the Douglas County Commission for November 8th. Today, we are talking about equitable entrepreneurship ecosystems and getting an update from some of our partners. Just a reminder for those of you who are online or here at the courthouse, these work sessions are for informational purposes only. We don't take any action during them. If you have public comment about what we discuss here at the work session, you're welcome to join us at our 5:30 business meeting and provide public comment at that time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jill Jolliker, who's going to start our presentation. Jill?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm excited to be with you all today along with our guests and to provide you with an update on what the county has started calling, along with our partners, the Equitable Entrepreneurship Ecosystem work of the Douglas County e-community. Before we dive into the presentation, I want to make sure we have time to let our guests introduce themselves. And they'll talk a little bit more in the presentation, but I want to make sure at the outset of today's conversation, I give them a chance to introduce themselves. So let's start with Christina, and then we'll work down to Jen.
Hi, my name is Christina Edwards, and I'm the Regional Director of the KU Small Business Development Center.
Hello, my name is Taylor Overton, and I'm the President of Black 30.
Hi, my name is Nicole Riles, and I am a private practice therapist and consultant with KN Riles Therapy and Consulting, and the founder and CEO of LRM Foundation.
Good afternoon. My name is Jen Laird, and I am the Director of Urban Engagement for a nonprofit organization called Network Kansas.
Okay. Well, we appreciate an opportunity to update you all. I put together a cover memo that was in your packet that gave the history of the work around entrepreneurial ecosystem building. It's rooted in the work of the Douglas County e-community, which is rooted in our partnership with Network Kansas that's up here. It might take a little longer to explain where the length of those roots and all the things that Network Kansas does. And we can always come back to you all and share more about all the partnerships and collaborative opportunities that we have with Network Kansas. But they've been at the table for this work for a good amount of time, and we're very grateful for that. The other part that this work is rooted in is the Anti-Poverty Community Health Plan that had a focus on strategies and objectives related to expanding the equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem, or expanding equitable entrepreneurship opportunities for our community members of color. And all this work is a natural extension of all that work. Sorry. My presentation to go. I'm not sure why not. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we've done introductions. We're going to then provide you a summary of efforts to date, some of the key learnings along the way in this work, and next steps. One of the, and I did want to say we'll probably have some guests that are joining us online, and I don't know, either now or later in the presentation, we can have them introduce ourselves, but Connie Fitzpatrick is going to be participating remotely online, and we'll bring her into the Zoom at the right moment. I'm just going to have to monitor my Zoom here in a minute. And then we've got our partners from Forward Cities that are also going to be joining us remotely for reflections towards the end of this presentation. So this is just a picture of the E3 road tour that our partners from Forward Cities participated in when they first arrived in Lawrence back in February. So that's Faye Horwit, who's the executive director of Forward Cities, sitting there on the right, and Qasim. I had Qasim's name in front of me, his last name in front of me. The staff there getting acquainted with the owner of Watson's Barbershop. That's Martin, that's sitting there in the chair, and was sharing his history as an entrepreneur and the purpose and the value of the work that he does, not only as a barber in the community, but as a leader, a mentor, and a friend to many in this community. and how that work ties to entrepreneurship. And that was kind of really early in the process of engaging with entrepreneurs in the community and understanding just how important this work is. So February of 2023, members of Douglas County and Lawrence Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, we gathered for a strategy workshop that was a part of the Forward Cities E3 Nation Tour. The following framing question was what guided some of the strategic conversations that were had during the 2 days that Forward Cities was with us, and we engaged partners in strategic planning discussions. And that was, how might we foster an ecosystem culture that equitably centers and values entrepreneurial leaders of color? So based on that work and the sessions that were attended and the folks around the table, there were 3 areas the team identified based on the assets that were available to them and where they thought they could contribute to the future state of articulating that framing question, and how you can link and leverage those assets and align them with new strategic opportunities. The following 3 strategic opportunities were what emerged from that discussion. The first one was Entrepreneur Listening Project. The second was a multilingual resource project. And the third was Indigenous Leadership Connections. Those 3 were developed in the strategic doing sessions that were facilitated by Forward Cities it kind of culminated the 2-day event of which they were with us and with all of our stakeholders in the system. So then once those sessions ended, the intent was that the doers of the strategic work were going to convene and facilitate a process for continuing to make progress on those commitments. So what we quickly realized, and was one of the staff members from Forward Cities, I think she knew it was going to happen. Magali, at the end of the February session, says, "Are you sure you guys are going to be able to take all these things on?" And I said, "Yeah, I think we can do it, no problem." But what we quickly learned was that while we had a really committed cadre of folks, capacity to do all 3 of those those objectives was, we didn't have it all there. But what we knew was that we had a lot of commitment to leading first with the Entrepreneur Listening Project, with the hope that the learnings from that work would feed into the making progress on the multilingual resources and the Indigenous Leadership Connections. And so the groups consolidated efforts into a single work group, and that's that Entrepreneur Listening Project that has been convened on a bi-monthly basis with leadership by Nicole Riles, who you're going to hear from a little bit more, along with the other folks that are here from the team. And the commitment was to make progress on a pilot project, and that was to work with the grassroots community leaders to curate a collection of narratives which articulate the lived experiences, assets, challenges, and hopes of the Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and immigrant entrepreneurs in Douglas County. With these narratives that would be made publicly available and strategically shared with area stakeholders, those would be used to inform the strategic planning and funding decisions that are made by local policymakers, economic development professionals, financial institutions, and philanthropic entities, and entrepreneurial support organizations. So that work has been happening over the course of the last 6 to 7 months. Those bi-monthly meetings, again, convened by Nicole, but with a lot of participation and support from folks around the table, but also listed here as a comprehensive list of who's participated in that work. That work has continued on an ongoing basis to realize that pilot project, and some significant successes have been reached in that time. So when we get to July, August of 2023, we really had a strong sense of who the leaders were in this work. And that was really, it was pretty apparent early on, but we had a real formal recognition of that. And thanks to some support from Network Kansas, we had some funding to acknowledge and compensate the time and expertise of the leaders in this work group. And the leadership collaboration was formally identified with these positions. So you have Nicole as being identified as the Chief Doing Officer, Christina as the project lead, Connie Fitzpatrick as a project lead, and Taylor Overton as a project lead. The work that they've been leading and facilitating earlier than July and August, but really with a lot of time commitments in July, August, and even up until this past month. And today are developing a survey and a series of listening sessions that were planned and executed. So now's a good time to let me open up the mic, share the mic with Taylor and possibly and Nicole and Connie and others to talk about these listening sessions. And I'm going to minimize the screen here for a minute and make sure I'm bringing Connie into the conversation. But I want to stop talking for a little bit. And Taylor, Nicole, do you want to talk about how you got to this point?
Yeah, after collaborating and talking about the best approach, one of the things we wanted to create was community. So not just a listening session or survey, but setting the stage where the people participating felt comfortable and like they were part of a community, and there was a lot of reflection as to, with them. So with that, we did two separate sessions, and we identified a primary group agency to host. So we have a listening session that is generalized and inclusive of all people of color. And then we also did a second listening session that was specific to our Spanish-speaking people in the community. So for the initial listening session, it was hosted by Black 30. So Taylor led the initiative on those details. And then our second session was hosted by La Estrella Mexicana, and Connie led the initiative to create that one. So Taylor can speak to our first one that was hosted back in September.
Awesome, thank you. So as Black 30, our goal is really to be a convener in this space, to bring entrepreneurs to the spaces where they will be heard. So when Nicole reached out and when Jen and Jill asked us to attend the first E3 meeting, I didn't even ask what E3 stood for. We just attended in hopes to be a part of. So when it came to this listening session, it was extremely, I'm gonna cry, sorry. It was extremely special for me because both my parents were there. And watching both of them in the community and navigate these spaces, I don't really think they were ever given space to voice what those problems were, what were those barriers. And while we did set out to do that as Black 30, we didn't have the backing of E3D, we didn't have the space of the listening project. And I did push up against the videos at first. I didn't think that people would want to be captured in that way. But now we don't have to come to you and tell you what people want. You can hear it in their own words. You can hear my mom in her own words. You can hear my dad. And to me, that's really special. So for me, as an entrepreneur, I have my own barriers, but for them, they're gonna have their own. And one day, hopefully my son will be an entrepreneur and he'll have his own. Very, very different from mine and very, very different from my parents. So, that was super embarrassing. However, on that day, total attendees of entrepreneurs, we had 26 entrepreneurs that were present. So that was fantastic. I think I received a text message from Nicole that night that we were extremely worried about the Indigenous population. We did not think we would have turnout, and that was actually our most represented population that day. The Indigenous business owners actually asked to break off into a separate room to just really mingle and network with each other. So it was very awesome. we were able to give them a separate space. We collected a total of 15 surveys that day, 14 of those virtual. One wanted to do separate written, and then obviously the 9 interviews that were taken. 2, as you know, were my parents. The primary business types that we collected or that we heard from that day, professional services was the highest, retail, and then finance was the third highest. So really interesting, and once you receive that data from us, I think you're going to be really shocked about the areas and the business types. Thank you.
A major part of this dialogue was not just asking people, what do you need and what are the barriers, but really allowing space for people to celebrate who they are first, what brings their passion to their work, and why their business is so important to this community. So that was a very enriching experience to just watch people as they flourish, as they talked about their hopes, their dreams. We had a full scope of entrepreneurs, some who were really just shaping out their ideas and had been formulated as a business for a short time, all the way up to, examples that Taylor gave, people who've been entrepreneurs for years. So it was a nice space, and we saw that duplicated in a lot of ways as we went to our next listening session that happened with our Spanish-speaking community.
And I think, I think Connie is joining the Zoom. I think she showed up as sustainability Zoom. So Connie, you're moved into the panel. So I don't know if you're able to unmute and if you want to talk about this particular side about the second listening session.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I am sick, so I am presenting from home. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thanks, Connie.
Okay, wonderful. So I had the wonderful opportunity to work with this fantastic team of women and everyone else on E3. And also collaborate with Adani and Raul, owners of La Estrella Tienda Mexicana, which is a restaurant and also a grocery store focused on Mexican grocers. A retailer. It also offers produce and canned goods from Central and South America. It was really important to partner with Raul and Adani at La Estrella Tienda Mexicana because this grocery store has been open for over about 20 years and has been open at different locations, but now they own their own building. But what has been integral to this work is that they know of all of their customers by first name. As they come to the grocer, they use the grocer for several services like sending money back home, paying their bills, getting additional services. That's also where other social services are provided. So it's more than a grocery, more than a restaurant. It's generally a cultural hub. At La Estrella, the listening session there was all in Spanish. We did have our main team and folks from the Small Business Center, the Small Business Development Center attend, despite not all of the E3 folks being fluent in Spanish. Their attendance was very well received. So I led the listening session in Spanish, and everything else was too. I would say that the biggest comment that it was well received. Everything was well received. People were genuinely in awe that our local government helped shape this event. And there was a lot of follow-up meetings with the Small Business Development Center, and everybody was really thankful that was an event in Spanish. So it's something particular about this Spanish-speaking demographic is that the sectors served are primarily of physical labor. So cleaning services like commercial janitorial, residential services, home cleaning. There are several moms with children there. Landscaping, carpentry. There was another culture-specific retailer who wants to open a grocer that is focused on South American foods, as La Estrella Mexicana is mostly focused on Mexican foods, so North American, and restaurant and language interpreting as well. It was family style listening session. As you can see, maybe in the first picture, they had a U-shape table. Everybody was sharing their stories. Most of them had been in service working for another company for 15, 20 years and were ready to start on their own, but needed guidance on how to begin that journey. I am losing my voice, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Nicole or Taylor, anybody else, Christina, want to offer any other comments about that particular listening session?
I really appreciated participating in that session, and I like how we constructed the room. We really thought about what was the best way to do it, and the family style was a really wonderful way to connect. And Hispanics, like myself, love to connect over food, and so we were able to share a personal moment before we got into the business of the event. And so I think that created some comfortability and made people feel comfortable opening up, because it's very vulnerable to talk about your business. And, you know, one of the things that was really impactful for me personally is growing up, Spanish was spoken around me, but not taught. Unfortunately, I still give my mom lots of grief about that. But when you really listen, although it's not presented in the same language, you can really connect and you can start to understand some of the things that they're saying. And so that was just a great lesson of just really taking a step back and listening, but also meeting people where they are in the spaces that they're comfortable can break down some of the barriers, because there's this natural community and them effort. But when we bring it together, we can break down some of those barriers and build that comfortability and provide the services that they need to help grow, the services that are accessible, that are free, that they may not have been aware of previously. So I really appreciated the event.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? What are some of the other resources available in Spanish that you can connect people to, or will we have a follow-up event that's also in Spanish? What's next?
So I would love to hear your comments on that. But I think part of this listening session is really just focusing on the need of those resources and recognizing that they don't naturally exist. Being completely vulnerable, the Small Business Development Center has a subset of those resources, but we really need to be intentional about making those resources available, but also opening up the dialogue and ensuring that, you know, the resources that we share with business owners are also accessible in terms of language and how the information is shared. So I think part of this exercise is recognizing that that is something that lacks, that we need to work to fix. I think this was a good opportunity to be vulnerable and start to think about how we fix our organizations.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I have
And
something else to add, if that's okay. Excuse me as I'm going to cough through this. So I realized as we were going through this process, and Jill mentioned in regards to capacity, we're going to do 3 projects, and then it was condensed to one. I mean, one listening session and focused on one project and 2 sessions. So as we were moving into this direction, I realized that yes, we have a big team with E3 that's going to work on this, but I am the only fully bilingual person in this team. And what does that mean? And how much work does that add to me in comparison to the Black 30 event? Everybody had a very specific role. And then on the La Estrella event, it was a little bit shifted. So after talking to the team and talking to Jill, we realized this is something that we're lacking. So all of these listening sessions are letting us know, the participants are letting us know what is lacking, but also through the process of going through this, we realized that we're lacking training in language for the services that are provided. For example, I had to translate some um, handouts for the loan that the chamber provides and other opportunities. I translated those flyers to provide during the listening session at La Estrella. And Christina understands Spanish, and she knows the culture, but it would be instrumental to be able to provide, at least that's my idea of what would be the next. It would be instrumental to provide those who have the capacity, like Christina and others, to level up their language skill to provide those services even more, or hire more bilingual folks and staff and services that serve entrepreneurs in the county.
Yeah,
And one of the things that I think is important, an important takeaway of what we saw with this second event especially, is that there is the interpretation of the paperwork. But what we also saw here was representation of being in their culture, being in their space, and not, sometimes what systems do is they continuously ask people to be removed from their comfort of culture to a space where they're not comfortable. And sometimes there are those systemic barriers and a number of things. So what we found is that not just in addition to creating bilingual paperwork and processes, how can we go out into communities and really not always ask people to come to systems, but how do we take the systems to where they are? And that was essential about these two talking sessions, is that we went to a space where it was identified, a space of comfort, and so much work was accomplished, so much information was shared, so many follow-up meetings were scheduled, just because, or partly because, we went into that community instead of asking people to come into systems. So that's a definite takeaway that I think will be an outcome of this project that we'll want to impress.
I also want to add that coming out of the Spanish-speaking session, Connie made a comment about how the SBDC showed up, Christina and her team, and how authentic it was, how important it was that all of them were there to see this resource that we have in the community that is free, that showed up on Saturday morning to be a resource. Might not understand every single word that is going to be said, but we are all here to support you, and we want to see you thrive in this community because we are also a part of the community that you choose to do business in. And so that was really powerful for me, hearing Connie say how authentically they showed up, because that's how we feel as Black 30, that the SBDC time and time again shows up so authentically in our spaces, with unwavering support. And that's very hard to find in our community. And that's what we need to make more of, more SBDCs.
I'm so glad to hear you talking about coming to the spaces where people are comfortable. I think about that a lot. I haven't been an entrepreneur, but also as a geographer, like how spaces make people comfortable or uncomfortable, able to share or not, and spaces that look like banks, which is what a lot of our lending institutions and even our professional institutions look like, are not the most comfortable places for most folks. And a lot of entrepreneurs, much of my work has been blue collar, so where can I show up in the boots I'm already wearing, as opposed to have to go home and shower and change and then come in and talk. So bringing those resources instead to the places where people are already comfortable is huge. So I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that that's something that everybody within these spaces hears and follows up on.
Well, I'm getting this video queued up. Nicole, real quickly, or one of the team members, this is just a teaser, but the video is intended to, there'll be a larger project later.
Yes, so from all of the amazing content that we captured in videos. We are working to create one impact video. What you'll see shortly is a teaser that are photos and snapshots from the two events, Moments of, and a couple of clips, maybe one clip from one of several entrepreneurs that were interviewed. I would add that in addition, at the La Estrella hosted event, we had about 6 or 7 people interviewed as well. So what we will do is capture into an impact video that pairs with some data and some metrics, and eventually formulating some ask, right? What are we finding? What are we hearing? So the summary of all of the data will pair with the impact video, and that is what people will be hearing from throughout, next year and beyond. So this video is a teaser. So it is just a way to give you kind of a visual of the experiences that we've talked about that we had with these 2 projects.
The audio comes through just so in here. I understand it comes through better for folks that are listening on Zoom. So again, this is just a teaser, but I think the visuals will be really rewarding.
They are fighting to make a difference in our Douglas County and City of Lawrence community. If the BIPOC business owner is successful, then the full community is successful.
Okay. I'm going to take us back to the slideshow and wrap us up. Let me pull up the slides one more time. Yeah, do it.
While Jill is pulling that up, one thing I did forget to say is one of the things that we have been encouraged to do, and not only in this project, but as ourselves as project leads and chief doing officers, is to center BIPOC voices. And I personally wouldn't have been able to fully grasp that without Jen's support. Jen is like the ultimate cheerleader via Network Kansas. She constantly is reminding me to not just take it on myself, really put the onus on the organizations and the spaces that should be doing the work, and not just do it myself, even though I have the capacity and the ability to do said thing. And I think that has really allowed myself to center my own voice in this project. Nicole has done the same thing, pushing back on things that I know I can do, but should I do? So Network Kansas has been instrumental in this entire project. And like Jill said, being paid for what we do as minorities, that's unheard of. We are asked to do so many things for free, and just help me with this one quick project. But to actually have compensation to work on a project that we are so passionate about. I just met 2 of you and I cried in front of you. I'm so passionate about this work, and to be compensated for that is huge. And I know that Network Kansas and played a part in that. So want to make sure that they say thank you. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Taylor. So you heard little tidbits of some of these key learnings already in the comments that have been shared, but just to put it all up on the board, I think Christina and or Connie said this, but that the stories of entrepreneurship transcend the language barriers. The importance of centering BIPOC in spaces, taking up the spaces and not shrinking in the spaces. Center the value on the people first and then the business. Celebrate our entrepreneurs of color, who they are and what they bring to the community regardless of the stage of business that they're in. The thread of this work taps into many spaces and across disciplines, mental health and the impact of historical trauma, money trauma, workplace trauma, and more. I think I have one more. My computer's just not working very quickly. Let's try one more time. There we go. So a few other things that we see a future where BIPOC are leveling up, they're creating agency, they're shifting from a place of service to being a boss. The idea of entrepreneurship as a way out of poverty. While this work started as 3 distinct areas, it ended as one that's still focused on our marginalized community members. Without system level change, this problem is only perpetuated. We're thinking on a systems level in this work. This work is creating new mental models for entrepreneurship in our community, and it's shifting power and centering BIPOC in decision-making. And the equity does sometimes mean that resources and funding should be redistributed to different places. So with that, I want to give you a preview of where we're headed next, and then we're going to do some reflections from some of our partners. So from here through January, the sense making from the surveys and the listening sessions will be worked on to be completed, finishing out that video and beginning presentations with the e-community partners and other stakeholders. So this is the first of those, and we'll continue to do that. Our friends at the City of Lawrence are working to get a session scheduled for City Commission early next year. But then thinking about how does this work get sustained, continuing to explore ways to incorporate multicultural work, whether that's entrepreneurship, food systems, heritage and cultural preservation, and county programs. What Connie talked about in terms of really acknowledging what she brings to the work that she does in her existing position with Douglas County and transcending those language barriers. We had some good conversations just in county administrator's office about that's something that we probably need to double back on and acknowledge. But then how do we grow that program to truly have more multicultural programming as part of Douglas County services? So we need to think about that because we really have a great asset in Connie. And then thinking about dedicated positions and a dedicated position and programs to do equitable ecosystem building full time. And other ways that we'll keep working on this is within the anti-poverty community health plan. We'll be kicking off the next 5-year community health plan. There's no reason why equitable entrepreneurship will not be a key focus once again. It's one of our success stories of the last 5 years that we've gotten it to this point, and clearly there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of enthusiasm to keep doing that work. Before our guests share some reflections, I want to make sure I share Sam Camp, that's been involved in this work from the City of Lawrence, provided a great quote here. BIPOC Entrepreneur Listening Session held on September 30th gave the city another great opportunity to hear from entrepreneurial-minded residents that have a business idea, are just getting started, or are looking to expand their existing businesses. In particular, they shared the unique challenges they face as minority business owners, as well as their aspirations for more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. As we continue to execute our strategic plan and build prosperity and economic security for Lawrence residents, hearing directly from our entrepreneur community will help us develop policies and strategies that are most effective. And then I want to make some space for Christina to offer any reflections. Then we'll hear from Jen, and fortunate to have Faye Horwit from Forward Cities that's with us remotely, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Okay, so I have a habit of getting excited and can easily speak at length about these things, but to be respectful of time and to tame my excitement, I wrote down my thoughts, even that, to remind myself. I also want to be respectful of time, so I'm going to cut some of the things out because I think I was a bit overzealous, even in writing this. So over the last year, I participated in the planning of the listening projects. And the two concepts I wanted to incorporate into the work are intentionality and authenticity. The goal of the work is not to check a box, so to speak, but to authentically listen to entrepreneurs and business owners of color to understand their perspective, hear their stories, listen to their needs, and take what we've learned into intentional institutional change. As an organization that is entirely led by minorities, our personal experiences certainly influence how we operate as an organization, and we like to think we're an inclusive organization, but we needed to recognize that our personal experiences, background, and perspectives are not encompassing of all the different life experiences. So we decided as an entire center, as an entire team, to invest in learning. And I like to think we were at a point where we were ready to change and we were ready to question our activities. We were ready to be wrong and vulnerable in order to truly be more equitable and inclusive as an organization. Listening to the stories, I could see myself, my family, and although I feel a connection, I recognize that my position creates a natural separation that I hope to eliminate one day. I personally believe that in order to create real systematic change, we need to seek to understand rather than to be understood. And Forward Cities presented us an opportunity to do just that. We were given the opportunity to sit back and really listen. By nature of what we do, we are often in the room to help further an initiative. So it was exciting to be in a space where we were secondary, in a space where our future activities would be driven by the people we want to serve and see excel, rather than influenced by us. And given the opportunity, so many people who would have not otherwise participated in these existing circles were given a space to speak. And there are so many amazing leaders that emerge through this experience. And I realize we have to go beyond the traditional spaces to really engage and connect. After the listening sessions, my team and I sat down together to reflect on what we learned thus far, and we're surprised and excited by what we learned. And I think there's a real opportunity to change how we deliver services at the SBDC, interact with the community, and there are new ways that we can navigate the entrepreneurial spaces moving forward. And that came from really intentionally and authentically listening. I've made some notes, so I'm happy to go into some of the things that we've learned, but to respect time and open it up for questions, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Jen, anything from you?
Wow, I'm going to jump on the emotional bandwagon because these leaders in this space, what has happened in this community is something that is absolutely incredible and breathtaking to observe. Network Kansas has the honor and privilege to work with 73 e-communities across the state of Kansas. 2 of those are the Lawrence e-community and the Douglas County e-community. I was fortunate to sit in on sessions for the anti-poverty work, to see the goals and aspirations of the county, to see the city plan as well, to work with partners, to integrate into the community so that I could build trust and learn the needs within Douglas County. Because of Jill's amazing leadership, she was able to connect the dots of the needs of the community, bring partners together that had never been spoken to before in many cases, to bring voices to the table, to be heard, to truly address the needs of the community from the ground up and not from the top down. Through that process, Jill reached out to the resource at Forward Cities. She reached out to Network Kansas. We were happy and thrilled to be on this journey. We listened to the needs as well and plugged in our resources uniquely, intentionally, and authentically to provide value to leaders like Connie and Nicole and Taylor so that their time and their expertise is valued. And that is a system that is very unique. What has happened in this process is not only a listening session, it has really, from the balcony view that I have, been the catalyst for equitable engagement in Douglas County that will build foundation for creation of wealth for members of your community that would never have had the opportunity. So it may be written down in the history books as a listening session, but in my mind, from the state of Kansas point of view, this has truly launched Douglas County in a position to change future for everyone. So I appreciate being a part of this. I appreciate your time today to listen, and I cannot give enough credit to these women, to the people that participated in this project to launch Douglas County forward in this space. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jen. Faye's with us. She sent a message in chat that she's at the airport, so there might be some background noise, but Faye's been with us along with Magali Yacinth from her team throughout all this work, and that partnership has been really instrumental. But Faye, are you able to unmute and offer any reflections for this work?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. Great to see the back of everyone's heads, by the way. I'm watching you on video, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I just want to say how beautiful it is to have heard, and I'm sorry I had to join a little bit late, but to hear some of these reflections. And was able to hear these as well in a meeting we had a couple of weeks ago. So gratifying. And I know that Jill shared the framing question earlier. And I want to take us back to that as we sort of wrap. Forward Cities does this work all around the country. We have worked in 50 plus communities. And what's really important, I think is most important to understand about what has happened there is also understanding the how. And this framing question, how might we foster an ecosystem culture that equitably centers and values entrepreneurial leaders of color? It's very important to understand that Forward Cities did not come up with that question. We did not set the path for what this work would be. Those leaders in that room there and others that came to the table more than 6-7 months ago to start this conversation, they were the impetus for this question. Because that's what they see, that's what they saw the need for, and that's what they were experiencing living on an everyday basis. And we just gave them the space to be able to lean into this work together. And 3 things that I want to point out in this and unpacking this question is the last part of it. I'll start from the end. Valuing entrepreneurial leaders of color. That means that their time and the trust that they have in these communities must be compensated at a level for what it is valued, for its value to community. And that was crucial. We heard them tell us that, and we just repeated it back to them in a way that they could sort of figure out how to act upon it. And very grateful for Network Kansas for stepping up and being able to make sure that happened. Because when other leaders see that that's possible, they will want to lean in even further. The piece before that around equitably centering, what that means is that there is greater opportunity, there's more visibility, there's a compensatory set of resources and support for this work. And that's what we saw happening. That's the way we saw Douglas County showing up. It's the way we saw all the other support organizations showing up, is that they understood that they had to go, this had to be above and beyond. And in order to do this work, there needed to be an equitable set of resources to do that. And that is sometimes on top of what's already in the system. And lastly, what I want to point to is this idea of ecosystem culture. And that is because while this was a project to jumpstart this way of working together and to build their muscles towards equitable ecosystem building, culture is long-term. Culture and ecosystem building and systems change is a long-term process. And what that's going to require is consistent and ongoing investment into these leaders and into the value that they bring to the local economy. We've been very grateful to be a part of this work. We will continue to run alongside these amazing leaders in all the ways that we can, and so grateful for having the opportunity to share.
Thanks, Faye. And thanks, Magali, who's I know is listening. All right. We didn't leave a lot of time for conversation, but let's have at it while we can.
First of all, thank you for all your work. It was nice to attend the Forward Cities sessions and sort of see, and then be away from it. I can appreciate Commissioner Reed's work and see where it ended up, you know, what that time together and that strategic doing work ended up where you're at. So that's nice to see. I know when you're in the work, sometimes you don't always see the beginning and the end. So, and we're not at the end. My question is around, there was as you're thinking about what our next steps are in redirecting resources, I'd like to hear more about what you're thinking when it comes to redirecting resources. And then if we redirect those resources, have we thought at all about outcomes that we might see because those resources were directed differently?
I'll start, and I think that's a tricky question at this point, because, you know, just when I started having conversations with Taylor early on about, you know, Black 30 as a standalone organization and understanding just as a community partner, how do I engage with Douglas County? How do I become a partner with Douglas County the way all of our other community partners are? Because we've talked about this, you know, the process of how did they get money? How'd that happen? And we're trying as an organization to be more intentional about that and strategic. So just having that conversation with Taylor about what's the story behind all of our funding partnerships. I think what county administration with the county commission has been trying to do in the last year or two has been really thinking more strategically and holistically about our budget and how it translates into policies, strategic plans, whether that's the community health plan, things like open space plan, other things like that. We're still kind of navigating that. So I think that's why we wanted to have this conversation and do this work. We first needed to, you know, with the help of Forward Cities and the E3 event, a lot of data was presented, a lot of background information about what's happening in the currently, and a lot of statistics were shared, but we needed those qualitative stories to really illustrate what we're lacking right now in the community in terms of resources to make the case. And so I don't think we've quite figured that out just yet, but we want to keep going down the path to figure out what that looks like. But I don't know if partners think anything differently.
Well, I'd like to add to that because one of the things as a independent, you know, entrepreneur, you know, think about the people we spoke to. That's representation of myself as well. There's a lot of richness, right, and service opportunity and ways to fill in gaps for services that are in our community. So that partnership, you know, with county, with officials, I think there's a lot of interest in how does a solo entrepreneur or a small organization that has a direct service to offer that can fill in a gap, that can look at the community health plan or the behavioral health plan and see that, hey, there's a gap there that I can fill, that my organization can fill. How do I make that connection? How do we partner? So that level of partnership that you speak of, Jill, I think we're seeing it on multi-levels, and there's a lot of potential and opportunity for people to be able to contribute to Douglas County and some of these goals that have been established. But we want to not just look at large, broad systems to do that work, because that's not always the avenue that some of those answers will come. Some of it will come through your entrepreneur who has lived experience in spaces and in areas where we are trying to reach.
Taylor, you were talking about not taking all the work on yourself and kind of giving yourself permission to share the work. And I think this will be really critical in terms of like, how do we as a community share the work? Are there particular partners that kind of need to be asked to step up to participate here? Do you have anybody in mind?
Yeah, I think that we could see a lot more from the Chamber of Commerce. I think that there's more intentionality that can be done in that space. I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I've been giving that feedback as it comes up. I feel as though it is received well at times, and we're navigating through it.
I was also going to offer, I mean, this is information that the Douglas County e-community needs too. As I think about my role as being the e-community coordinator, what does this work look like? My support and the county administration's support for entrepreneurship, what are the expectations there in the long term? Because there's times where I'm not sure that I can sustain what's needed to keep this work going, even though it's not reliant upon me, it's reliant upon the people around this table. But to that point, I'd also give Jen a shout out for encouraging to not take on everything, like the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge coming your way in February. But how do we sustain this work even at Douglas County to meet the expectations of the community now that we've kind of cracked the box, so to speak, on what's out there? That's tricky. And I think that's why we look to our policy leaders for some guidance.
One of the pieces I'm thrilled about is that you're being compensated for the work, and that is so key. People of color, women of color are always asked to shoulder things, for the good of everyone, but for free. So I'm excited about that. I'm also curious where the funds are coming from and how sustainable they are.
The funds so far have come from, just to compensate to get to where we're at, have come from a grant from Network Kansas. If commissioners recall, when you approved the lived experience compensation policy a few weeks ago, we did include E3 initiatives in that. However, I'm not sure those stipends are going to be are reflective of the level of work. If the expectation is that the level of work stays where it's at, I'm not sure that stipend is going to be that through the county's policy is going to be sufficient. But that remains to be seen.
So Jill, refresh my memory, but the policy that we talked about was compensating people for like attendance at board meetings. It was not really
Right.
for kind of the behind the scenes kind of professional services we're talking about here. Is it
Yes.
relevant to that?
Yes, and Faye put it in the chat, and she mentioned it in our planning meeting for today. But she says she highly recommends exploring a part or full-time equitable ecosystem builder role to lean into this work with guidance and support. And just being county staff, sometimes I'm like, ooh, adding another staff member, but that can be here. It can be in another organization, but I do think an extension of this work to reflect the investment that the county's made in our strategic partnership that we have with Network Kansas and the other organizations, Small Business Development Center, the Chamber, and others. It could be a good fit.
And I will add from the Network Kansas perspective, we are extremely dedicated to building equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. We created a new arm of our organization specifically for urban engagement, for working with minority entrepreneurs. I will say that although I will continue to seek funds to support efforts like this, we cannot sustain this long-term. Our vision, my vision as the director, is to plant the seeds to bring the initial work to fruition so that it can launch. And then once the community sees how valuable this work is, they will find resources amongst themselves, whether it's Douglas County or any other community that I work closely with, to cultivate equitable ecosystems. Then you will see value in that. Your community will see value in that. And then that will be something that you would like to invest in for the future.
The more the longer I'm a part of Network Kansas, and I'm an e-community coordinator too, when I look at my peer e-community coordinators in other communities, this is part of their full-time job. Whereas y'all know that I wear a lot of hats, and the e-community coordinator is a small part of that. But this work in other Network Kansas communities, it's pretty foundational to folks' daily responsibilities. So that's just something I want to make sure I put in y'all's radar screens.
Well, I've been very excited about this work session, and it's been really wonderful. And was hoping for a teaser of the video, so thanks for that. Saw lots of familiar faces that I'm excited to hear from later. I just, wanted to, well, first add my gratitude to the table, and, for the three women sitting in front of me, especially, and Connie online. Good, you're still with us. Hi, Connie. I hope you feel better soon. It has really been a joy for me this year to get to know each of you a little bit more, and to just be honestly a bit of a voyeur to this work. I appreciate being included on the list before, but I don't know that I earned a spot on that list, if we're being honest. So, but I've been happy to cheerlead from the sidelines and just keep pushing the path that I think was etched out earlier this year really clearly from those of you who are at the table. And you mentioned it, Christina, in your comments, and that's intentionality and authenticity. And that has been really, those have been evident through lines to me. And so it's been work that I've been really proud that Douglas County made an investment in, and an investment of Jill's time in, because it's been an extra large lift this year. And so anyway, I've just been really grateful to see it, and I've learned a lot, and I know there's so much more to learn, and I'm excited for that. And the reflection that I've had throughout this year and this work has been that when we talk about economic growth as a local government, that it means different things to different people, right? It has different definitions. There's sort of different traditional methods of trying to generate economic development and a growth in tax base, and what different strategies there are, right? And so I've thought a lot about that. And for me, this focus on equitable entrepreneurship and really being intentional about that, and not shying away from that hyper-focused conversation, not making it too broad, and just giving space to keep talking about the specifics of that, I think has been, it's been really moving for me to watch. And it's also been really motivating for me to recognize that, to me, entrepreneurship, like as economic growth, it's just human-centered. Like, it's the most human-centered approach to thinking about how we grow an economy of a community, right? And community means different things to different people, and how large that is, and the environment that it's a part of. But it's just about so many values that I think are really important to this community, to this commission. It's about resourcefulness, it's about resilience, it's about partnership and collaboration. Entrepreneurship is about creativity, it's about upward mobility, it's about figuring out how to do for yourself, what you want to do, and to create for your family and your community what you think is missing. That's sort of the foundation of most entrepreneurs, and what they start for themselves is also what they start for the community. And so I've just been really inspired by that, and feel like a focus on investing money and energy in this work that really keeps centering the voices of entrepreneurs with the most barriers in front of them, right? The most historical lack of access and comfortability in certain spaces that are considered where you talk about things like economic development and economic growth. So I've just been really proud to be a part of that, and I hope that as this work continues and we think of creative solutions for how to fund that in a meaningful way, how to find investments at a local level, a state level, regional level, to keep some focus on that work, I think it will pay off in dividends. I think that it's what really will contribute to the sort of generational wealth building and rising of everybody's boats that we speak of. I think that this is a key factor in that, because it is so human-centered, and it's talking about individuals, whether you're a sole proprietor and you're the only employee of a company that you created in this community, or you're a business that grows to employ hundreds of community members, and that there's a whole spectrum of that, right? And I want to make sure that anybody with an idea or a seed that got planted knows where to go to water those seeds and to grow that idea in this community.
I want to echo a lot of what Commissioner Reed said without repeating all of it. The framework that I kind of was left with from the Forward Cities meetings was entrepreneurship as a human right. And I think that was a line from Faye, who's still on the line here. And I've thought about that and used that. And I think as a culture, we have framed the employer-employee relationship as the norm and entrepreneurship as this extra thing. But entrepreneurship just brings so much power, and removing barriers so that people have access to that power, I think, is kind of what's going on here. So I'm excited for the work and really glad to hear about it and to have you here and to know how we share the workload.
Any other questions, commissioners? Any final comments, Jill or any of our team?
Just thanks for the time.
Yeah, great presentation. Exciting to see what our next steps will be, and thank you for being here. With that, we'll close our work session, and we'll reconvene at 5:30 for our general business meeting.